To be able to discuss the gains from trade, we have to get two things defined in the first place. They are absolute advantage and comparative advantage. Okay? Absolute advantage means here the ability to produce 1 unit of a good using fewer units than another economy. In other words, when we compare the two economies, we would say, whichever can produce that good with the fewer inputs or fewer resources, we would say that's the absolute advantage. If you recall what we learned in chapter 1, you would find that this definition is built upon the concept of scarcity. Okay, remember we said because we always face scarce resources. So if we can use the fewer resources to achieve the same goal or the production of the same thing, then that's what we are looking for, right? That's the absolute advantage here. All right, so the numerical example would be, what we saw on the previous slide. Let me flip back there. And so here, once again, if you look at this, the first table, you would find that in terms of the iPads production, country B has absolute advantage because it spends less amount of time producing each iPad. Okay. However, country A has the absolute advantage in pencil production. Okay, it spends 3 less minutes compared to the country B in the pencil production. Okay. Let me again go to this slide here. Okay. So in that first table on the previous slide, we find countries have absolute advantage in different goods. Okay. So under that circumstance, we tend to believe that A and B should trade with each other and both should benefit from their trade, right? So this is pretty much consistent with our common sense, as we said before. Okay. What's more challenging is if one country, like country B, has an absolute advantage in everything. Okay, as the second table shows on the previous slide. Okay, so under this circumstance, should both countries still trade with each other? Should both benefit from trade? Okay, these might be inconsistent with our common sense. Okay? Because we tend to believe that, probably country A doesn't want to trade, okay? Because it doesn't have any absolute advantage in everything, okay, or anything. So if country A opens its door, that simply means country B would dump its good on country A's market. Okay, so make a lot of money from country A. So we tend to believe that country A probably would get hurt from this trade. Okay, and this is why Paul Samuelson said the best example of an economic principle that is undeniably true, yet not obviously to intelligent people. Okay. Because remember we said even in the second table on the previous slide, we still believe A and B should trade with each other and both should benefit from their trade, right? But it's counterintuitive. So we really need to spend some time looking at these examples. Okay. By the way, Paul Samuelson is a very famous American economist who won the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economics back in 1970. Okay? He is actually the first American winning that award. Okay, but our discussion in this chapter, the idea actually comes from Adam Smith. Okay, so he later we're going to check out the example he used in his very famous book, The Wealth of Nations. Okay, all right. The second concept that we need to introduce is the comparative advantage. Okay, comparative advantage means the ability to produce one unit of a good at a lower opportunity cost than another economy. Okay, so if we recall the definition of opportunity cost, that is the benefit or satisfaction from the second best choice. Remember, back in chapter 1, we said that when we face more than one choices, we always take the first best and leave the second best and other choices on the table, right? So what we could potentially get or benefit from the second best choice is our opportunity cost. Okay, so the numerical example, again, we could go back to, let me flip back to this one. Okay, let's look at the second table here. So let's see, country A spends 60 minutes producing each iPad, right? Now, if we assume that country A gives up iPad production, so it has 60 minutes that can be used to produce 4 pencils, right? Because it produces each pencil within 15 minutes. So if it gets 60 minutes, then it can produce 60 divided by 15. That's going to be 4 pencils. In other words, to be able to produce each iPad, country A has to give up the production of 4 pencils. All right. Now, similarly, you can do that for country B. Country B spends 20 minutes producing each iPad. If it didn't produce iPad, instead it produced pencils, within 20 minutes, it can produce 2 pencils. Okay, that's 20 divided by 10. All right, so the opportunity cost here for country B to produce each iPad is 2 pencils. Okay, so that's the opportunity cost for B. Now, if we put these two countries together, A gives up 4 pencils to be able to produce each iPad, whereas B gives up only 2 pencils to be able to produce each iPad. So here we find country B gives up less to be able to produce each iPad. So we would say country B has a comparative advantage in iPad production. Okay, let me say this again. Because country B gives up fewer pencils to be able to produce each iPad, so it has a comparative advantage in iPad production. All right. Okay, let me go back here. Okay, and to be able to talk about the gains from trade, we have to go through a numerical example on the worksheet number 7. Okay, it's actually a pretty big numerical example. So we're going to spend a lot of time checking that out. Okay, and we would also work on the PPF graph to show you the gains from trade. Okay, and so that's what we're going to do on the next video.